What's up, gamers? Welcome to episode 40 of the Business Casual Gamers podcast. This is the show focused on gamers with jobs, families who have things to do in real life. My name is Chris Smoke, and as always, by my side is the reliable, dependable Mr. Aaron Connick.
Sometimes. How's it going, Chris?
Sometimes.
Just sometimes.
You doing well?
I am doing great. I am excited to talk about some really awesome games this week.
Lots of things to talk about. But before we do that, we have to jump in. You know what's coming, ladies and gentlemen. You know this is the time where we beg. We first let you know, if you'd like to get in touch with us, please go to our website at businesscasualgamers.com. That's businesscasualgamers.com. You will find links to absolutely everything from the merch to the places to find us on iTunes, YouTube, Twitter, you name it.
You can see my random speculation on games that may or may not be coming to the Nintendo Switch.
You can definitely follow Aaron's ridiculous diatribe on Twitter at BISCasualGamers, and that's really fun to do. While you're there, please, if you're on iTunes, if you're on Google store trying to find our podcast, please take the time to rate us. Again, Aaron is going to be updating a whole bunch of his games that he's giving away for free as part of this ongoing bribe. If you give us a rating on any of those, please let us know. Drop me a line at chris@businesscasualgamers.com.
And what I'm going to do is after every episode, I'm going to update the list because I've got even more that I'm giving away. I'll update the list. I'll post it. Again, take a few seconds just to leave us a review. Send us, and I will send the game your way free of charge just to say thanks for listening to the show and reviewing us. So you take a few seconds. In return, you get a great game. There are lots of good games. Yep. As I was giving away, I'm like, I don't want to keep it in the collection necessarily, but this is a game that people would love to have. So
keeping it in the family, the BCG family. So we've already had some people take us up on that. Thank you again for those of you who have done that. We really do appreciate it. And while we're on the topic of how to find us, YouTube is becoming, I think, the YouTube as a BCG outlet is becoming a little bit more popular for us. So please take the time to subscribe to us on YouTube if you like those things. We promise. We know we've had busy lives recently. We're going to try and get back in and do some more retro reruns, do some more video content we think you'll enjoy. You should be seeing that hopefully before the summer's out. We have some plans, hopefully do that very, very soon.
Absolutely.
So before that, I think we have one more thing from Aaron, who has a very important announcement.
I do.
Drop everything and start listening.
I have a request of our audience, and this is important. If you've seen some of the posts on Twitter, you'll have followed some of this, and we'll get into it as we go through the topic this week and one of the games we'll be discussing. But I made the decision that I really do want to acquire some certain games from the Beatmania 2DX series. Really important series to me. And I'm looking for kind of the needle in a haystack and maybe actually a particular needle in a very small haystack. And so there are some special edition versions. That's the Konami-style special editions. And I'll talk about the story in a little bit of Beatmania 9th style, 12th style, which is Happy Sky, and 16th style, which is Empress. If you have these, or even if you don't have them and you just know of somebody who has the special edition versions of these, and again, I've posted pictures on Twitter, so take a look there if you want to see what it looks like. Even if you can just point me to a person, even if you don't think they're interested in selling, if you can give me a lead to a person who has these, I will pay you $20. I'll give you some games. I will, give you a shout out on the show. We will get you compensated for your generosity, but I would really appreciate these are hard to find, but this is something that as a collector, we've talked about this on past episodes. This is a collection that is important for me to have, that I want to preserve because it was just something really special and really unique that Konami decided to release. So any help that our listeners can provide, I would greatly, greatly appreciate it. And just hit me up on Twitter or, as Chris mentioned, businesscasualgamers.com. You can get in touch with us a number of ways. So I really appreciate it.
Most definitely. And so transitioning into the BCG discussion topic of the week. Now, this is episode 40 for us, and we thought we would continue on. We made reference to this a little while back, a couple episodes ago, and we thought it might be a good chance. So if you have been around listening to the show since episode 1, and if you haven't, please go back and listen to it. It's Meet Business Casual Gamers. Aaron and I both went down our top 10 list of best video games to us. And there were a couple of overlaps. There were also a couple of things that were very, kind of personal to Aaron and I in how we grew up and what kind of moves us as a particular game player. And we thought that, number one, we'd take the quick opportunity as we're moving along here to give you a brief update and see if that might have changed and how that might have changed over the last 12 months or so. But more importantly, we figured why not continue this special episode 40 with our favorite games 11 through 20 and kind of continue that out to the 20 and see if we can kind of get a little bit further along in the spectrum. Now, if you've listened to us over time, you probably can pick out a couple of these already. I can tell. You probably know me pretty well by just listening to the things that I continuously talk about. So they didn't make it into the top 10. They're certainly going to make it in these next 10 games. And so with this, I think we're going to have a really good discussion on what kind of moves us as gamers. And the funny part is, Aaron and I both kind of briefly glanced at each other's list, not in great detail yet. But it's funny to see how each of us choose certain things and why, and we'll get into that as we get through.
Yeah, and this has been an episode where, as we talked to listeners, I think what people appreciated so much out of that first episode was, there were some games where I'd say they're kind of popular choices, where some people would say, hey, if you like this style of game, this is the obvious game. But there were a lot of choices on there that were very personal that either people forgot about or people honestly said, I didn't think of it as that, but I've gone back and I kind of found a new appreciation for it. I think as we get to that next tier of game, once you get out of that, really, this is universally recognized as a great game. You're going to see some stuff on this list that I think people would say this is a good game. There are some games that I don't know that people have even thought of, but I think that you're going to see some choices on there that people, again, they underrate in terms of when they talk about what are the best games out there. I think if you like these genres or types of games, I think you're going to find some stuff to maybe go back and either dust off, or maybe you heard about it, but you never actually took the time to play it. We really hope that we're serving the audience with this episode by giving them some ideas and some really timeless games to play.
Yeah, and I think it was funny because when I finished my list, I went out and I Googled, top 10, top 20, whatever, top 50 video games, and it was funny how I'd say a couple of the ones that I like are kind of just ones that are in general considered good, but vast majority of the ones that I pick are ones that didn't even make it in the top 20, 30, 50, maybe even 100 of a lot of these sites. I think that's really fun to do. One of the other things that I think we might do down the road would maybe be a top 10 underrepresented type games, or maybe we'll do that in some of the YouTube things. We'll see how we do that. One of the things that came to me when making this list was there were games like, Jackie Chan's Action Kung Fu. We've done a retro rerun on that. A game that I think is really, really awesome, and everyone should just play it to see if you enjoy it. But it also technically isn't one of my top 20 games, right? And so I think there are a lot of those kinds of things where it would be fun, to your point, Aaron, to take some of these games that are not like honorable mentions necessarily. They may not stand the test of time with respect to top, X games of all time. Maybe they're the top 100. Who knows? But they're games that, to your point, should be experienced by everyone if you like these kinds of genres.
Yeah.
So with that, I think let's see if we can move right into this, Aaron, and see if we can start with maybe a brief update on your top 10 list. Is that appropriate?
Yeah, absolutely. So let me just quickly run through the top 10. For those of you, certainly go back and listen to episode 1. We always try to make these timeless. But there's only been really one change and a couple reshufflings. So to recap, number 1 game going 1 to 10, Chrono Trigger.
I'm sorry.
Okay. I see what you did there. Number 2, I actually moved the Fire Emblem series up. There would actually be probably 5 games, honestly, in my top 20 from the Fire Emblem series. 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. I put 10 as kind of my favorite, best example. So moving slightly down to number 3, Katamari Damacy, the whole Katamari series. Number 4 is Persona. I would say 3, 4, and 5. You can kind of take your pick. There are different things I love from all of them, but that is definitely a series that I think is worth playing. Number 5, Pixel Junk Monsters, one of the ones that we discussed that I think is kind of criminally underrepresented as how good that game was. 6, I know that was common to both of our lists, was Link to the Past, Legend of Zelda: Link to the Past.
Yep.
7 is actually a new entrant to the list. I think I alluded to this in our BCG Hall of Fame episode. I used to have StarCraft in my top 10, and while I still think that probably that is up there in that tier, I actually lately have found that I'm watching StarCraft more than I'm playing it. And so what I finally decided is I'm playing a lot of Diablo 3, and I have continued to play it, and I've been really excited for the new Necromancer class release. And so I just said, you know what? I think I've just got to go with where I'm spending my time and what I'm actually playing. Yeah. So I put Diablo 3 in my top 10. Next is going to be Ridge Racer, R4, Ridge Racer Type 4. Number 9 is going to be Marvel vs. Capcom 2. I am looking forward to the new one. What is it? Infinite, I think, is the new one. Jet Set Radio is rounding out the top 10. So again, only really one new game to the list, a little bit of reordering, but nothing major. And so that's the list. So let's get into the 11 through 20. So number 11, I think one of the things that people will notice from my top 10 list that was noticeably absent given how much I've talked about this series throughout the rest of the podcast is where's the Final Fantasy, Aaron? You talk about it all the time. Where the Final Fantasy at? And so the Final Fantasy is right here at number 11. So I know that we had in our BCG Hall of Fame episode, we talked about Final Fantasy VI. Again, if I was picking multiple entrants in a franchise, Final Fantasy VI would definitely be in the top 20. But I'm actually going to go Final Fantasy IV. Okay. And I'll explain why. And there is a particular version of Final Fantasy IV. So Final Fantasy IV was honestly, I remember when I saw the Nintendo Power Edition and I saw this game advertised and I saw it on the back of the box on the Super Nintendo, the Super NES I got for Christmas. But Final Fantasy IV was the game that I just looked at. I said, I have to have this. Like, whenever this comes out, just take me to Toys R Us. Let me get this game. Yes, it was. And it was just a game that really delivered in a way that was above and beyond. I mean, this is when RPGs were still a relatively new genre for me. And I just remember at the time, I was so blown away by the game. There was nothing of that production value. The music's so memorable. And I will tell you, the only complaint that as later RPGs and definitely Final Fantasy VI, once it was released, where I think Final Fantasy VI really outdoes the original SNES Final Fantasy IV is in the end game, specifically the final dungeon. And what I mean by that is we all talked on that episode about how epic that making the party selections and figuring out, who's going to go where and what the team is going to be. And even if the ultimate experience really isn't that different, I mean, depending on how you organize the parties, I think it's that feeling of choice that really stands out to me. Whereas Final Fantasy IV, right, you took the same 5 party members, and every time you fought Zeromus, it was the same 5. Now, if you play the GBA edition of Final Fantasy IV, which I would highly recommend, even though I think it's gotten a little bit more expensive, anybody who loves this game needs to own this version. Once you beat the game, it basically takes you back to the final dungeon, and when you go to Mysidia, you can basically go to the top of the tower, and you can reselect any of the party members that you've met throughout the game. So you get access to Yang, Cid, Edward, Palom, and Porum, and you can make them selectable party members.
That's awesome.
And so you can decide, you can play through the final dungeon and play, whatever combination of characters. I think Cecil is the only one that's locked in your party. And I will tell you, even though that seems minor, the thing that is really unique about Final Fantasy IV, and I mentioned about RPGs, I really like having characters and classes that are very unique. And it's like, they get this ability. Kain can jump. Nobody else gets to jump. That's his thing. And I really like the fact that the party composition, it really feels different depending on who you bring. They also added 2 endgame dungeons that are absolutely exceptional. And I would say anybody who hasn't played through those, it absolutely gives you a reason to replay that game. And you can completely swap the parties however you want. When you add that content on, I really feel like it gives you that endgame experience that, honestly, I feel like my only complaint about Final Fantasy VI was that once you really min-max it, you figure out, okay, Terra's got the best magic stat, or Realm has the best magic stat, so they're better than this other character. But in Final Fantasy IV, when it boils down to, okay, what technique do I get? And you get special items that make Yang, he has his charge attack. And when he unleashes his charge attack, he does triple damage. Or Kain has a jump that does more damage. So it really gives, it plays up. Exactly. You can throw spoon daggers. I really feel like the combination of that endgame content, that, anybody who's played Final Fantasy IV, the story is fantastic. The music is phenomenal. It has my favorite Final Fantasy song. For those of you who remember when you're going towards the Dark Elf Cave, the city of Troya, Troyan Beauty is the name of the track. That's my favorite Final Fantasy music of all time. It's just got so many of those elements, the characters, the backstories, and the gameplay. it's really just one of those games that no matter how many years go by, even though it's one of the older Final Fantasy titles, it's always one I go back to, and I find myself just like powering through in a weekend, and I can't put it down.
It's an excellent game, and strangely enough, for being such a big fan of that game, I've never played the GBA version of it, so I probably need to pick that up.
I will lend it to you, but I would say as a fan, buy it. It's well worth it.
I'll definitely have to buy it. Well, that's it's a great game. It really is, and I think that there's just so many things. For me, I still think 6 is a little bit better, and we'll talk a little bit about that when we get to my section here. But it's certainly undeniable. It's a great game. It came at the right time. It was it's the combination of Super Nintendo, the new power, and what that opened up, and as far as just overall quests and the story. Some people have said that the story is somewhat generic in a sense. Yeah, I can kind of see that, but realistically, there are a lot of really fun twists and turns in that game that just help make you really, like you said, really understand and really believe in the characters at the end of the game. And that ability to take whoever you want into those final battles is actually really, really important, I think, to helping you really get the full feel. So I will definitely have to play that one.
And the thing that Chris doesn't believe me, when I told him this, he did not believe me, but I promise it's real. Once you start maxing character levels or getting them up in levels, Edward actually becomes the most powerful. I promise it is real. They make his stats go up exponentially, and I think they did it as a joke, but he's really good.
Definitely a joke.
Once you get his final weapon. He's real good,
Must
Chris.
be a joke. Okay, it's a joke. It's a joke. We'll give you that. Okay.
You no longer just hide him. You actually use him to attack people, and it works. It's crazy.
I just can't do it. Okay.
It's crazy.
Moving on.
Yes. So my number 12 entry, probably not surprisingly because you heard my plea at the top of the show, but I'm actually going to make it the Bimani series. Now, for those of you who are not familiar, the Bimani series includes games. The two most notable is Dance Dance Revolution, which a lot of people know, and Beat Mania, which I mentioned. You also have things that are probably lesser known, but people will know the spiritual successors. So take Guitar Freaks or Drum Mania. Wow, sounds a lot like Guitar Hero. Konami pioneered the music genre, but they didn't. Some of them, Dance Dance Revolution was the biggest hit.
Yeah.
Beat Mania, even though it was probably less popular in the U.S., it's a very popular game internationally, and the fact that there have been 24 versions of it plus, that's just the 2DX at this point. I mean, it's a very long-running franchise, but of all the games on this list, I would say that the Bimani series probably had more of an impact on my life than any other game in here. And I'll tell you why. Bimani, for me, it really transcended games, and it became a lifestyle. So I think I've told the story on the podcast before, but the first interaction I ever had with this was I was on a school trip in high school to Disney World, and we had some time we were killing before we left, and we were near an arcade at the beginning of the entrance, and we saw somebody on a platform, jumping around and dancing to this song, and we're just looking at this. We've never seen anything like this, and we're watching, and I just sat there kind of mesmerized, like, what is this game that I'm watching? And I tried it. I was terrible at it, like most people are who tried it. But I came back and just said, I have to find this game. And I started playing, and it kicked off, honestly, probably at least 4 or 5 years of when I would get together with friends once this started to catch on and people really started to take on this series. This is what we hung out and did. Like, we played DDR, we played Beat Mania, even beyond the social scene, which it was a big part of what I interacted with. That this was like what we hung out and did. I would also say it influenced my music tastes more than any other game I've played. So some of a couple of the music acts that are featured in one of the earlier Beat Mania games actually either directly or indirectly led to a lot of the Japanese and Korean artists that I still listen to today. And that was, again, these games came back. I go back to 1999 is when I discovered them. And so you're talking about 18 years after the fact. I am still listening to stuff that I wouldn't have heard if not for this series. And it's really special. I think anybody who's played Dance Dance Revolution knows, like, there's nothing really like it, even though there have been games that have come along to try and clone it. Beat Mania is also fairly unique in that it is such a skill-intensive game that when I was good, it was, I'm not as good. If you were to go out on the internet, you see people who have been playing it for over a decade that the skill level is just through the roof. I am not that good, and certainly nowadays I'm unpracticed.
Oh, come on.
But the game, it's just so much fun. Even if you play it on the lower difficulty levels, there is just something about being able to create music. It's why Guitar Hero got big. It's why Rock Band got big. There's just something about being able to create music and create a game out of it that's accessible to people that you just really can't replace. And Bimani is that series to me.
I can't help but the entire time you're talking about this stuff with DDR, I can't help but think about that movie Grandma's Boy.
Yeah.
and
First of all, featured.
If you've never being a video game aficionado or any video games, which you must be to be listening to our podcast, you really should go and watch Grandma's Boy if you haven't. And just all I'll say is the DDR scene.
Yeah,
this
just watch
this
for
is
that.
Aaron, and what we're gonna do is once we've all watched this and we all know what to expect, we're gonna ask Aaron to mimic that scene in his music game of choice.
I knew you were gonna put me up to it, but yeah, the Bimani series. I mean, it's special, and that was honestly, it was in making this list in preparation for this episode. That's honestly what inspired me to complete the collection. Is that to not go too long on this, but when after I think it was after 8th style, so after the 8th version of the game, the home versions weren't selling quite as well, and so Konami basically said, we are going to petition the fans if we can get 20,000 essentially pre-orders of the game, where you had to basically pre-order the game with a valid Japanese home address, nonetheless, then they would agree to produce the game. And so even beyond that, so low production count of the game, but after that, you had to go to their website and specifically order the special edition and pay a huge premium to get it. But the packaging and the add-ons, the swag that they gave you was just beautiful. And they did a great job. That carried on. So they made that happened all the way through 16th style.
Wow.
So think of how many fans had to carry this series for almost a decade
nuts.
to keep it going.
Yeah.
That shows you the passion that was there for this series. And that's why I said, you know what, I want to keep this collection going. It's rare enough and it's important enough to me where I want to keep this stuff out there and alive.
Very good, very good.
So with that, let me get into number 13. I've talked a ton about Fire Emblem on this show, but I do want to mention the series that honestly, if not for this series, I don't know that I'd know about Fire Emblem, and that is Advance Wars. So many people who are diehard Nintendo fans, whether you've played the series or not, you've probably heard about it. It's also referred to as Nintendo Wars in Japan. But it is the turn-based strategy game that really made me passionate about the genre. And for those of you who haven't played, Fire Emblem is kind of the series where you have very specific characters that you get attached to, and when the character dies, it's gone for good. Advance Wars, by contrast, you pick a general, and that general or a commanding officer, and they have very specific abilities. So you have the one that specializes in ranged attacks. You have the one that specializes in air units rather than ground units. And the individual units that you command are kind of throwaway. It's right, you get generic soldier or generic bomber, but all of the games play out differently depending on your commanding officer. It was a game that is just, it's what Nintendo, I think, and Intelligent Systems, who's the developer, they do it so well, where it's just so immaculately designed. The level design's great. All of the culminations up to the final levels where you get to command multiple armies at once. It's really, I tell people who love Mario and Zelda and all the things that Nintendo is best known for, take all of that quality and apply it to a strategy game, and that's really what I feel like Fire Emblem and Advance Wars do so well. I debated whether to put Advance Wars Dual Strike, which is on the DS, or Advance Wars 2 for the GBA on here's the one game to play. I would tell you that I'm kind of torn. I obviously think if you like any of them, you should buy them both. I think Advance Wars 2 has probably the best single-player campaign. I think it's the best balanced. The hard mode is actually exceptionally well done. It's a challenge, but it's very doable. I think Dual Strike, if you're playing competitive or playing the challenge maps, I think that's probably the more fun because you get to do kind of tag team between different armies. But I just think the series is immaculate. If you like turn-based strategies, most people have played this genre if you're into the genre. But if you haven't, and honestly, if you're just a Nintendo fan, I think this is even more accessible than Fire Emblem. And I think that it is the difficulty is such where you can jump in and have a good time. and just get some of that Nintendo charm that they do so well, frankly.
Yeah, I'm ashamed to say I've never played any of these. I've thought about it, but I don't own any, and I really want to play them. And actually, just hearing you, it made me think that, maybe wonder if they're going to have any new ones coming out for the Switch, maybe.
It's funny because the last one that they released, I can't remember the year, but Days of Ruin, much like the name, they ruined the franchise.
Okay,
and so
well, there goes that.
But I want to play another one. They made some really horrible decisions with that game, but it's stuff that you just say, okay, lessons learned. There's nothing wrong with the core formula. They just made a bad game and some horrible balance decisions. But it's not to say that the game is any less relevant today. So I really do hope that there are plans to bring it back because, again, Fire Emblem has kind of had its day in the sun recently, and it's getting the love for Nintendo, and I think they've kind of given that the banner of the strategy game they want to run with. But Advance Wars was the big one for a very long time, and so I really do hope they have some plans to bring it back.
Yeah, definitely. Or I don't know if it's on VC or anything else, because the problem is with games like GBA games and original DS games, it does become a little bit more challenging for people, the average game player, to actually play. For me, even as a collector, I don't have a GBA. I do have a DS, but I really hate using it because it's the fat one, and the screen's all washed out. So any way that I can play it on a modern 3DS or on a virtual console or something like that would be very valuable to me.
Yeah, and I'll check. I'll try to post on Twitter. I think that at least some of those are available on virtual console, maybe the GBA ones, but I will check. So my number 14 game is actually my favorite competitive game of all time, even more so than Marvel vs. Capcom 2, maybe just because I'm better at this game, but that would be Super Puzzle Fighter 2 Turbo. Now, for anybody who has played this game, it's one of those things I almost just say the name and smile comes onto your face, and you say, oh, Puzzle Fighter is so good. But anybody who has enjoyed Tetris or any of the popular puzzle games, I always tell people, this takes that core simplicity of all you do is you drop the colored blocks and match them up. You could explain it to a child, and even if they're not great at the game, they could watch it for 5 seconds and they'd understand what they're supposed to do. So it has that childlike simplicity. But when you get people who are good at the game and who really get into it, the intensity is every bit as much as a fighting game. And that's what's great. And you have, as you are dropping blocks on the other character's side, you see the Ryu doing the Shoryuken and dropping 40 blocks on their side. And it has that great competitive push and pull feel. The other thing that I'll mention about it is that some of the balancing decisions and what I'll call the rubber banding effects that they put in the game, to where even when you have a really great player that's playing against just a good player, it has a balance in there where, let's say, for those who haven't played the game, you match up blocks, and every time I break a block, the opponent gets blocks dropped on their side. And if the blocks ever reach the top to where the next block can't fill the screen, that person loses. And so every time you're gradually breaking more blocks on your side, they're building up on the other person's side, but it's creating an opportunity for them where if they can break a bunch of blocks in a row, they create a huge combo.
Send them all back.
Yeah. And it's that push and pull where it always keeps the games interesting. That just, to me, is really the magic behind this game that very few have ever replicated. Because let's face it, in a fighting game like Marvel vs. Capcom 2, if you're bad, you're going to get stomped.
Oh, yeah.
There is no coming back. A great player will destroy you and may even perfect you every single game just because you don't know what you're doing. But I always appreciated anytime I'd play against people who, they'd watch it and they were kind of intimidated at how fast you were going. And you tell them, look, just try a game. We'll slow down the speed, the drop speed. You could always tune it to where somebody would feel like they had a shot. Or you could play my favorite part of the game is the secret character Dan. So anybody who has played the Street Fighter series knows Dan, the lovable joke character. But it was great because they put Dan in the game, and even though there were 4 different block colors and mixing up the patterns was part of the challenge of you're trying to block or to break your different rows of colored blocks, Dan, he doesn't mess around with colors. He drops all red blocks on your side,
right.
so that
I
you can
remember
make
that.
the max combo and just decimate him.
Dan.
So when you won with Dan, you knew you'd done something. Like,
Yeah,
you
yeah.
knew that was a legit, like, I'm just really good at this game. But it's
That's
stuff like
awesome.
that. It's those little Capcom touches that just, it made the game just so memorable to me.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a big fan of puzzle games, and I played puzzle fighter games. I played a lot of Tetris games. I played everything from Dr. Mario all the way through. And there's something about this one that is super special to me. It's funny because I never really considered any of the puzzle games, to be something that would be on one of my top 10 or top 20 lists. But now that I'm hearing you talk about it, I mean, the Puzzle Fighter series, they're really fun games to play, and they really are. I mean, I just downright. They're so simplistic, as you mentioned, but there's so much nuance pushed into it, just like Tetris, the Grandmaster, or anything like that, where it could go anywhere from like I said, you could put a 5-year-old in front of the game and can understand what's going on, and you could put an absolute master that, of course, could play much at different level, certainly, but still have just as much fun.
Yeah, and this one, to your point earlier on Advance Wars, this one, even though it's a PS1 game originally on home release, this one did receive an HD remix, so you can get it on PlayStation Store, and it's less than $10, so just a great pickup. So 15 may be a controversial one, but this will be fun, I think, once we get into your list as well, to do some compare and contrast. So 15 for me is going to be Rayman Legends. Now, I am going to put it out there and say, and believe me, I labored over this a lot the first time I played this game. I am going to put this out there as my favorite platformer of all time. I really think it's that good. Now, you're going to say, Chris, you're going to say, but wait a minute. Platformer, I know that name. Isn't Mario a platformer? And I would say, why, yes, Chris. It's better than all the Mario games. As much as I love Mario,
Really?
I really think that this game is that good. And I will explain. So Super Mario World and Super Mario Galaxy are my favorite Mario games, and they were both close to making this list. But in the way, if you think back to when you first played Super Mario World, it was a game that, if I had to put one word around it to describe it, it would be the game just over-delivered. It had so much there. So even once you played through the stages, all the secret levels, the Star World, it's like it's a game that even once you thought you'd seen it all, there was just so much more to keep doing in that game. And Rayman, in the same way, it's just a game that over-delivers well beyond what I ever would have expected. So even if you just play the base game, the levels are phenomenal. Before you unlock any of the secrets, they basically then unlock, you've got music levels where, for anybody who's played the game, you're going to know what I'm talking about, but you have levels where it has some theme song, like the theme song from Rocky, and the jumps you make in the level go with the beat of the song, and it's just stuff like that it's
You
so
just like the beat
clever.
games.
I do like the
that's what
rhythm
it
games.
is.
But they also have unlockable levels for most of the last Rayman games. So you can unlock like 2 full games worth of content. The graphics to this game, and this is something where I think, having it be on a modern console matters. The graphical power of this game is just unreal. It is. I've mentioned the game engine before, the Ubisoft game engine. It is just gorgeous. It's honestly one of the prettiest game engines I think that's out there. The animation is just so slick. It's so fluid. It looks great at all times. The high style. The sound is really memorable. And the one thing I would say that when I thought, like, is this really better than Mario? I think the thing that put it over the top for me the most, it's honestly the co-op. And anybody who's played Mario Galaxy remembers the co-op, and it's like, okay, one person plays Mario, the fun part of the game, the other person just shoots the stars and knocks the enemies. That's not co-op. That's nonsense. But Rayman really does have exceptional local co-op. I played with, I think at the time, Ethan was 6, and we were able to play through the entire game together. And it wasn't something where, it was on baby mode and he didn't feel like he got to do anything. It has a great way of allowing players of different skill levels to keep playing together. And I will tell you, especially for parents who are listening to this show, if you're looking for a game to play with your kids, this is the number one game from a co-op standpoint that I would recommend. Your kid will love it. It looks great. It's fun. It's very, it's kind of like, it is harmless fun that is easy to understand. It's like, just jump, Just follow me. Just do what I'm doing. Press one button and you'll make it and you'll be fine. You'll be able to play more. It's just a phenomenal game. And even though I know Mario, it has that Nintendo fan base, it has that this is the game you played as a child, I really think that Rayman belongs in that top echelon of platformer games. And even though I know that is going to be heresy in the minds of some.
No, I don't think it's heresy. I mean, I played this game on Vita, and I beat it. And I agree. I think it does fit into the upper echelon of platformers. I mean, I number one, like you said, I was blown away when I played it with just the quality of the graphics and the quality of the controls. And everything just seems like it's very tight and pieced together very well. And I agree, there's a lot of content there in the game. I mean, honestly, from my perspective, it speedruns really well, too.
Yeah.
If you ever watched a Rayman Legends speedrun, it's really fun to watch and see what they can do with those things. But I think that there is, and agreed, I think that they're certainly on the same level. I don't know, I might still give the edge to Mario just because it does have that two things. And one, it has that je ne sais quoi, which I know is kind of a cop-out saying, well, I don't really know what it is, but it does have something. And maybe part of that something is the other point, which is, Mario really, a lot of people might argue with me that there have been other platformers, and there have. But Mario as a franchise, a side-scrolling platforming franchise, and certainly I would say Super Mario World, Super Mario 3 are arguably the two best in that kind of genre, that area. They were just so groundbreaking in how they approached the ability for players to go all sorts of different places, scroll up, scroll down. Super Mario 3 was the first game on the NES that lets you scroll up, down, and then diagonally up and diagonally down, which is actually a really big technical feat on that hardware. So I think that, it's just the way they've approached that, and just the way they've approached the power-ups and things like that give Super Mario World and or 3 a little bit of an edge over Rayman, because Rayman, it's just not quite as flexible. But you're right, there are a lot of really cool little nuance areas. The musical stuff you talked about before, and the ability to have all the collectibles and the reasons to go back and kind of replay each level to get perfection is a little bit higher than, like, say, Dragon Coins in Super Mario World.
And I appreciate it. I think that it has that same Mario factor where anybody can play the game, but if you want to get everything, it requires a very high skill level, and that's what Mario did so well too. Is that it invites everybody, anybody can try, but if you really want to say, I've got all the stars, or I've got all the teensies in the case of Rayman, it means something, and know that you can play.
I'm close.
Yes. So my number 16 game is going to be Portal 2. Now, Portal 2 is a game that, for people who have played it, I think there's going to be a lot of heads nodding along at this selection. Portal 2 is a game that, honestly, when I played it, it just blew my mind. It was just a game that I'd never seen anything like this before. It immediately clicked, even though it's a game that, even as you continue to play through it, the way you interact with the game, the way you discover, like, oh, I didn't even think of being able to do this. It's a game that you just get to play in this sandbox and discover so much and feel like you discovered something new, even though the developers knew, like, we put it there all along. It's just, for people who have not played this game, this is the one of any on the list where I always tell people, all of my selections, for the most part, maybe with the exception of Katamari, I would say, if you like the genre, definitely play this game. For others, I would tend to ask, like, okay, what types of games do you like? And maybe, like, Chrono Trigger is not going to be for everybody, even though I think it's my favorite game. This is a game that I would literally say, if you like video games at all, you have to play this game.
And it's a great co-op game, too.
It is. And the co-op,
exceptional.
The fact, when I talk about just, above and beyond and added value, I played through the single-player campaign, and then the whole co-op campaign has completely different puzzles, and it's two games wrapped into one, and they're both amazing. I think the humor of it as well. I mean, it's one of those games where the writing is just so clever.
Yeah.
GLaDOS is hilarious. It's just all of these little things, the world that they put you in. I could not put the game down. And I think that's just a testament of a great game, is when you just want to keep going and you struggle with it for a little bit, but you spend just enough time to get to that point where you feel like you're not going to figure it out, and then something connects or something jumps out at you and it triggers. And it just, for anybody who hasn't played this game, you have to pick it up. This is just one where I don't even care what kind of games you play. I don't care if you think you're going to like it. You have to try it, because I've never met a person who has played this game, even if they've struggled with it a little bit. I've never met somebody who, even if they didn't feel like they wanted to finish the game, that didn't walk away saying, that was time well spent.
Right.
That's really cool. I was like, I've never seen anything like that. And I think that is worth the price of admission alone.
Most definitely. Most definitely.
Now, number 17 for me is going to be a game that is on literally nobody's top 10 list, nobody's top 20, probably nobody's top 1,000 list. It is a game, this is a true dark horse if there ever is one.
Child of Eden. Oh, wait, sorry.
I was debating it, but no, I couldn't do that to you, Chris.
Say that.
This is a game that has a whopping 75 Metacritic rating. So really bringing the heat on this one,
it's up there,
Chris.
top echelon.
But
here.
I would say this is one where, yes, I am a fan, so I'm somewhat defending it. But I will say, if you take the time, and I did in preparation for this episode, to actually get past the scores and read the reviews, it's kind of like a tale of two cities. And then it's like, read what I wrote, not what I scored. So the game is Front Mission 4. And people are going to say, what is Front Mission?
What's a front mission?
What's a front mission? And, oh, wait, I saw that game on the PS2 Metacritic list, on page 6 of all the games, and I just skipped it. People who are into turn-based strategy, this is a franchise that is totally under the radar screen. So for those of you who don't know, very popular in Japan, but this is a Square Enix franchise, and this is one that goes way back. I think the first one was SNES, if I'm not mistaken.
1 and 2 were SNES.
But Front Mission 4 is, I think, the perfect example of where Metacritic can sometimes lead us astray. Because if you read all the scores basically say, well, it's a great game, and if you like strategy games, you have to play this and you'll love this game. But it's a turn-based strategy, and who really likes turn-based strategy?
Yeah, that's kind of, yeah.
I basically looked at it, and it's like it gets a 20-point reduction just based on genre and expected audience alone. And I always tell people, Fire Emblem gets the Fire Emblem and Advance Wars, they both kind of get the gimme because they're Nintendo franchises. And I hate to pull the Nintendo card because, again, those are higher on my list, and I think deservedly so. But Front Mission, for people who haven't played it, it's a mech-based, turn-based game. But it is, if you were to play it, I think it's just one of those games where you walk away challenged, but feeling like you are so rewarded for the decisions that you make. The game is told through the perspective of, it goes back and forth between two different parties, essentially, kind of in different parts of the world, in different scenarios, whose paths collide later in the story. But you assemble a party, and you can decide what type of mechs they pilot. So you can have the sniper mech that, they are mobile, they can get to sniper positions. You can get the really heavy mech that fires grenade launchers or rockets from afar, but they have poor mobility. All these tactical decisions that you can make, a lot of the reviewers complain oh, wait a minute, you mean I have to build my mech and I have to outfit it with this specific left arm to reduce weight? But it made it easy if you wanted to, because you could just say, no, I want the sniper mech, and here's a pre-built mech that'll do what I want. It's a game that if you want it to be simple, you can make it very accessible. But if you want it to be hard, it gives the people who are big strategy fans all that payoff and all that customizability. The story is actually, people say that it's cheesy. I think the story is actually great. I think that people, for whatever reason, it's very modern. It tells a political story. I think it's got memorable characters. I have not actually, because of putting this game on the list, I actually forgot that Front Mission 5, which was a Japan-only release, it actually later got a full English fan translation. So I actually bought Front Mission 5 and will be playing through that. The best part, for people who play through it and who really love the game, there are 2 secret missions you unlock, one for the one army and one for the other army. And the one final mission where essentially it puts you in a warehouse and it has mechs that are coming down a ramp and all of your party's at the bottom. And basically it says, you win the mission if none of the opponent's mechs get by one of these spaces. It is one of the most challenging missions I have ever played, but I will tell you, it is probably my greatest accomplishment as a strategy gamer.
Wow, really?
It is so great, and when I finally got it, it was just one of these moments where you're like, I feel like the smartest person in the world, drop the mic, turn off the PS2 and walk
awesome.
away. So for those of you who like Fire Emblem, I know we have fans of the series. If you haven't played Front Mission 2, don't worry about the Metacritic rankings. Try this game out. I think you will be very pleasantly surprised.
Yeah, I've always liked the Front Mission games. I played the ones in the Super Nintendo, Super Famicom versions a couple times actually, and I think it's funny thing is I think a lot of people tend to think about these kinds of games. We think about any sort of these kind of tactical type games as being more fantasy focused, and there's the time in the early '90s and late '90s, I guess, is going to the early 2000s that. Games like MechWarrior were out. That MechWarrior was very much like that, like you described, Aaron. It's like, oh, you're overheating your gun. You need to do this and that. And I think that for whatever reason, despite the fact that everyone I talk to still likes mechs in the U.S., clearly a lot of people more in the Asian side
Sure.
or in Asia and Japan and maybe even the European region like mechs. I guess for whatever reason, U.S. hasn't been quite as popular, and so I think the strategy type games they go after have been more fantasy focused. But it's you're right. It's one of those things where if you like the subject matter, if you like that kind of a mech kind of a battle system, I agree. I'd play the thing. I actually haven't played 4. I'm thinking I probably should go pick it up and play it some more as well because I love the games back in the day.
Absolutely. So funny you mentioned the fantasy-based strategy games. So this will transition into my number 18 pick, which is Final Fantasy Tactics. Now,
Yes.
Chris, all I can say about this game is that we love this game so much that I will never forget you importing the Japanese copy and us somehow. Now, people who listen to this game, at the time, we did not read Japanese whatsoever. And
I read
so
it a little bit, but not
trying
this.
to get through a game with that plot line and those, the number of menu commands, it still baffles my mind that we somehow made it through that game, but
gosh.
It was so worth it.
It was, okay, so a little backstory here. So I was okay importing these games because I didn't know a lot of kanji. I had knew a decent amount of kanji when we were going through these games. So when you play like Super Famicom games like Final Fantasy V, it's a lot easier. When you go to the PlayStation level and you FF7, which I did, and then FFT, in the Japanese version, it becomes, especially that one, the kanji was insane, at least for a very, very novice at the time. We were in high school at the time.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that was it was still a fun adventure, though.
For people who enjoy Final Fantasy, this was kind of like the game you didn't expect. I mean, it was something where I remember when it came out, we had no idea that, oh, wait, Final Fantasy is not like an RPG. This is a strategy game. Totally unexpected. The class system to this day, it's just one of those memorable, the calculator. The calculator is always the one when I tell people. The fact that you're killing people with math, it's like, all right, I'm going to sit here and I'm going to figure out, if I can do X equals death, okay, if all your levels are divisible by 3, I think I can kill people with 1 turn. It was stuff like that where all of the classes felt really cool. They all gave you unique skills. You could carry skill, much like it was kind of like based on, I tell people, the Final Fantasy V battle system, where you'd learn skills from one class and you could make them sub-abilities when you move to a new class. I also say that I think the PS1 version story, people criticize the translation a lot, and they say, it makes an already admittedly complicated story really, really tough to understand. Even though I think the PSP version, you suffer a little bit of performance. Like there were some areas where there's some slowdown on the summons, that it makes it a little bit worse performance-wise. It's still very playable, but the retranslation of the game is fantastic. And so I think that is one where if you haven't played it, absolutely worth taking a look at and a phenomenal game.
Most definitely.
So number 19, I'm going to go Shadow of the Colossus. So I would say...
We expected this.
Yes. For anybody who makes the art, gaming is art, I think this is the game that is the thesis statement. Everybody who's played this, it does have the je ne sais quoi that you mentioned, where you just say, there are many different reasons, but there is something about the purity of that experience where you say, no, we're going to put you in this overworld, but there's no monsters. There is only the 16 colossi. You are single-mindedly focused on finding them, taking them down, and then delving further in the story. And it's that purity of experience and the fact that every Colossus, everybody has their favorite. Everybody has the ones that stand out to them the most. My favorite is Phalanx, number 13, the one in the desert where you have to jump on his wing off the horse. It's great. it's a game that I would tell people, even though I think it's not for everybody, I think the people who enjoy action adventure games, that's a must play. The fact that it's getting a PS4 re-release, pretty soon you'll be able to play the hopefully best version of it even.
Yeah, and I think that's the fun thing. So I'll tell you, I played this game, and we talked a little bit about it. I loved the game, except, and it's going to sound stupid to say this. It's like saying I love the game, except I don't love the game. I love the game, except I didn't like the climbing parts too much. I know they tried to do some wonky stuff with how you climb and how you hold onto the very fur areas and all that stuff. I just felt like that detracted a little bit, and I know you could argue very easily that without that part, there's a lot of like the challenge and a lot of the rest of the game kind of gets mulled, kind of gets watered down and diluted into something that's not nearly what it is. But I was really more interested in the story, to your point. And so what's so interesting about this game to me, right now, it's a decent game in my mind. But with the re-release, I'm really interested to see how they're changing it. Because as I understand it, I think they are changing the controls, and they're going to add in a different mode that is more, I guess, the way I understand it, is more tolerant of people like me who just not really jive in, not really with that climbing piece. They're going to give you the climbing, but it's going to be a little bit easier as far as how to hold on and how to keep your balance and things like that. Yeah,
and I'm excited. It's one where I don't know that I immediately saw the need to make another re-release of it, but I love the game so much that I'll probably check it out. So number 20, I was going back and forth on this, but I finally I dialed it in after playing through another game from this franchise this weekend. It's going to be Ratchet & Clank Future: A Crack in Time.
It's a good one.
I am a huge Ratchet fan. I go back all the way to the beginning with the series, but A Crack in Time, I think, was really the pinnacle of the series. I hope they make more. I know they did the PS4 re-release that we reviewed on one of the episodes, and I did recently, so I will be playing through that. But I think the thing about A Crack in Time that stands out to me, even more so, I mean, if you played Ratchet games, the whole character action, the platforming, the shooting, that's all just absolutely top-notch. The humor, the graphics, but the time puzzles, the Clank time puzzles in this game are some of the best puzzles in video gaming history, and people who have played it talk about it. But I'm telling you, if you have not played this game, even if you just like puzzle games and can just put the game on easy and tolerate it to get to the puzzle sections, these puzzles are absolutely mind-bending, and it's some of the coolest stuff I've ever seen in a video game. So anybody who has a PS3, I would highly recommend going. I mean, this is a game you can pick up for $5 to $10, and it is one that you will be more than happy to replay multiple times.
And definitely pick up the re-release for PS4 if you have one of those as well. I mean, it'll whet the appetite to continue to play more and more of these Ratchet and Clank games. They're very, very good.
Absolutely. So, Chris, that is my top 20.
It's a good list. It's a good list.
We've gone through a lot of games. So, Chris, I am gonna turn it over. Let us go back through your top 10. I know there's a couple of shuffles that have happened as well. Let's start there.
Okay. So, first, let me just say the funny part about how all this works out is you can immediately, looking at the 1 through 20, Aaron, looking at your 1 through 20. You can see a lot of I just think it tells such a great story about who you are as a gamer.
Yeah.
And it'll tell, likewise, mine will tell a good, I don't know if a good story. It will tell a
story.
Different story about how we play games together, and also games where I kind of just go off into the things that mean a lot to me. A lot of these, admittedly, are, I would say, I think I got pulled more into the nostalgia trap for some of them than others, but. Let's start with the recap. So, and what I'm going to do, actually, is I have 2 updates for my top 10. I'm actually just going to read the top 10, and then I'm going to give the 2 updates. I'm not really going to place them, and I'm not going to displace any of the ones in the top 10 as well. And that's a little bit cheating, but just to spare us the time and of having to reshuffle things and talk about things we've already talked about, I think it's probably the best way to go. So my number 1, we should know this already, is Final Fantasy VI. It's just such a great game. I mean, it is one of those games, Aaron, you talked about games that you go and you end up playing once or twice every year over year. FF6 is that game for me. I just do it. And the next game, you can probably surmise by the fact that we are sitting in a room covered in Zelda stuff, is Link to the Past. Again, Zelda. I think it is the best Zelda. I'm not going to say by far now, and we'll get to that in a minute. Number 3, The Last of Us. I mean, this game, I've talked about this game so many times and just how it hits you emotionally. It hits all the right buttons as far as a story, enthralling story, a very encompassing world. You just feel miserable and sad throughout the entire game, which is such a great experience. It sounds stupid to say that, but the experience of that game is so amazing. And also the mechanics across the board are just amazing. I cannot wait to play the second one. Number 4. So it's funny that we got to this number 4. Because after all this stuff...
I'll wait for
Chris is going to eat his words here. After all this stuff about I Am Setsuna and Chrono Trigger and all these kinds of things, I went through, we pulled up our list for the very beginning, and I saw Chrono Trigger at number 4, and I thought, yep, that's about right.
Oh, not I Am Setsuna?
But didn't I say...
Not Setsuna, huh? Okay.
Okay, so we'll just bypass that one. Really. Chrono Trigger is number 4. Number 5 is Castlevania Symphony of the Night. And you'll see as we go a little bit further, the Castlevania games, unlike Aaron, I will note about my list, there's no particular genre, no particular, type of game or game franchise that I would have more than 2 or 3 of the same in my top 20. So I felt free to repeat a couple ones, and you'll see a couple of those as we move forward. Castlevania is one of those. Symphony of the Night, number 5. What an awesome, amazing game.
The best one, definitely.
The best one. If you've not played it, wait to the end of the podcast, turn it off, go buy it, go play it. There are a million different ways to get to that game. Number 6, and this is one that probably would be ones that I would probably look to push down a little bit. Still an amazing game, is Uncharted 2.
Yep.
I played Uncharted 4 last year. I really, really enjoyed it. I think 2 still captured the primary essence that Naughty Dog put into it, where they started to go from... They just made everything bigger and better. The story is great. The characters are great. And the back and forth with all those big set pieces.
Yeah,
awesome
2 is
game.
my favorite as well.
Really, really good game. Number 7, Legend of Zelda Wind Waker. Enough said. Best game ever. If you have a Wii U, I know very few of you do, play the HD re-release of this game. It is so good. Oh my god. It's probably worth buying a Wii U when they get to the point where they're not super expensive. The next game, number 8, World of Warcraft. I would be remiss if I didn't mention World of Warcraft, and despite the fact that I run from the game like the plague now, just because of its addictive nature. It is really a good game, and it has redefined, redefined a modern level MMORPG. Every game out there that comes out is compared to World of Warcraft, and I still would challenge anyone to find a game that is better mechanically, better story-wise, better everything than WoW. It's the best package out there for right now, my opinion. Even to today's standards, the game came out in 2004, so I mean,
it's a landmark.
It's 13 years old. It's amazing. Number 9, Witcher 3. I've talked about this game almost every episode of the entire podcast. I mean, it is an amazing game. If you haven't played it, go play it. 3 is specifically one of the best games I've played as far as just overall stories. There's so much to do. You have lots of great options, lots of good battles, lots of good DLC. Great fun was had by all. Number 10, Skyrim. Really good game. Obviously, it's growing. It's going too many places too fast right now for being such an old game. It's still an amazing experience. A lot of places to learn, grow with. A lot of cool things to kind of learn, and you can really build your character how you like in that game. A lot of the Oblivion type games are like this, but Skyrim I think is my favorite. Now, as far as updates, I mentioned after we did the first episode, a couple episodes down the road, I realized that Super Metroid was not in my list, and I don't know how it managed to not make it my list because it is definitely there.
Yeah,
it's one of the top 3 or 4, most definitely. Super Metroid is one of those just best
Almost
games.
made mine as well.
It's just an amazing game, and I remember playing. I found every secret in that game by myself, running through the things. We just played that game 100%, and then, we talked about kind of playing games fast. The game. Super Metroid, like the original Metroid, will give you a different ending slightly or a different view of Samus if you beat the game quicker. That's really what got me into speedrunning. And it wasn't modern day speedrunning, but I really played that game and I routed it so that I could actually get to the point where I could beat it inside that 2-hour real time limit or 2-hour game time limit that gave you that cool little ending. So that's what started it for me, and it's really holds a good place in my heart. The next one. This is the new one. This is Breath of the Wild.
Yeah, and this was one where I remember when we talked about doing this episode, I was fully expecting, based on how much I said, is Breath of the Wild going to make the list? Because based on the way you're talking about it, I fully expect it to be there.
It's top 10. I mean, it's definitely, it might even be top 5. I won't even tell you. It is such an amazing experience of a game. It's one of those games, even in my BCG mindset. So, go back to early mid 90s. We talked about this, Aaron. You know, we would play. I'd sit down and play like 40 hours of freaking Final Fantasy games in the course of 2 or 3 days. It was absurd how much I played that game, and you know, I can't do that these days.
Right.
For many reasons, right? I just don't want to do that. With Breath of the Wild, I could actually just sit down, you know, come home from work, put the kids to bed or whatever, you know, get everyone fed, whatever needs to be done, just spend time with the wife and sit down and just play that game and just get lost in it, right? That is exactly the kind of game that I want. And I can play for story, I can play for content, I could just play just to veg out and explore. And it's such an amazing game. If you have not played it, I really do urge you to play the game. Play it on the Switch. If you can find one.
Yeah, and it's funny
find.
because I've mentioned I've kind of dropped off the bandwagon for the 3D Zeldas. I didn't like Twilight Princess much. I know you didn't really either. But I've kind of fallen off the wagon, and I'm really happy for Zelda fans, and you're obviously a big one. I keep hearing from people who love the franchise that this one's different, right?
Oh my gosh.
Even if it's not something that I think once I get a Switch, I'd be willing to give this one a try. But even if it doesn't end up being something that I love, I'm really happy for Zelda fans because they are such passionate fans that they got the game they finally deserved. It's a franchise that, again, Link to the Past made my list. It's in my top list. So the fact is, I'm a Zelda fan too, even if I don't have as many selections in my top games list. Mm-hmm. But I'm really happy that I feel like they've righted the ship and given people what they wanted.
Yeah, I mean, with things like Link Between Worlds, and you know, that's another amazing game.
Yes.
It's very close to Link to the Past, but it's unique enough to play the game certainly and pick that up. But anyway, Breath of the Wild, amazing game. Now, on to the next set here. So I mentioned we've already talked about Castlevania games, but my 11 is Castlevania 3, and let me tell you why. A lot of people don't like this game, right? You've seen me. I've done a retro rerun on Akamajou Densetsu, the Japanese version of the game, which is arguably a little easier. The U.S. version is, I'd say, undoubtedly harder. The enemies hit harder. They've made the game a little bit harder, a little bit more punishing in certain areas. There are areas like where they added bats and other flying things that make it really challenging to run as a speedrunner or even casually. But Castlevania 3 was one of the first ones where, you know, I'm almost said, despite the fact that 2 was not my favorite game growing up, I can appreciate the RPG elements they added to that game. Yeah. 3, I think, decided to go back to the original kind of flavor or recipe for the game. They gave you the ability to find and optionally choose play as other characters, Alucard and Sypha and those characters, which I think is really fun. Yeah. Grant lets you go back and actually play the game how you want to play it in certain areas. And in doing so, they actually gave you split paths. So you can actually go from the beginning to the end in one of a couple different ways, which, if you think about this, it might not be normal, or might be commonplace for games of today, but back in the early 90s, you know, when these games were developed, I mean, this is amazing to actually add this level of gameplay and you know, I guess, choice into an NES game.
Yeah, and I've watched you speedrun this game before, and this is one where when I saw it on your list, I wasn't surprised, given that I know you're passionate about speedrunning. You spent a lot of time in this game. I do remember this game growing up, when the first time that I was able to switch to Grant, it blew my mind. Like the whole concept of selecting different characters. I mean, we played
Walking
it like
ceiling,
Mario 2. It was the branching paths to me. This game, it's probably not the first one that allowed you to take different routes through the game. It is the one that stands out the most, as this is the first time I remember having this much flexibility of how I made my way through a game. And definitely, I would also put, much like you did, Symphony of the Night as my favorite Castlevania. Mm-hmm. But I agree. This is, after that, this is the next one I'm picking as well.
It really is. And if you do have the chance, again, I've mentioned this before in the podcast, but it has, I probably think it's the best soundtrack of any NES game. Certainly, if you listen to the Japanese version, the Akamajou Densetsu game, it actually has a different sound chip that has a little bit more sound channels in it. And just that soundtrack is so amazing. Yeah. Every single song, every one is a hit. It's amazing. Just listen to it. Number 12 for me. This is probably coming out of right field for a lot of people. As you know, I spent a lot of time playing not just console games, but also PC games in the 90s. And this was one of my favorite games of all time, just for I hinted at it when we did I played a game in the last couple episodes that was by the same folks, and the game here is Secret of Monkey Island. I mean, it is just such a fun game. I love those adventure games back in the day, and I absolutely love the fact that it crosses. It's not afraid to break the fourth wall. It's not afraid to make fun of itself. It's not afraid to poke fun at things, and that's just what has been such an amazing part of that, part of the experience for these games over time is really just setting up a hilarious story that you can just get into. You can just like deep belly laugh throughout the entire game. And you also get a really good story and you get a really fun adventure over time. And it's not saying it's hard, but it's not super easy. You're just going to point and click mindlessly through the game. You're going to have to think about some things as you move through areas. And they also have, while I know that they've re-released the game, and they've allowed you to play the game in the new style graphics. It also allows you, I think in all those versions, it allows you to go back to the pixelized old school version. I would say you play it in that version because it's just so good.
I was about to ask, I have not played this game in 20 plus years, and so seeing it on your list, I haven't played anything from this genre in quite a while, so I would like to go back and give it a try. I have played through it, but there are only parts of it that I can still remember. It's been so long. But so you would, I guess, recommend playing through the original graphic version?
I would personally, but it's just for me. I like that style of graphics. I like kind of seeing what the original intent was. And granted, I'm just not a super big fan of how they've redone Guybrush Threepwood.
That's fair.
But it's not saying it's bad or anything.
All right, well, I'm going to check this one out because it's been a long time. When I saw it on your list, I said, this is a very memorable historic game.
Right.
But it's been a while, and I want to give this one another shot.
Most definitely. Now, 13, Final Fantasy IV. We've already covered it. Yeah, it is an exceptional game all the way around. It is the first Final Fantasy I ever played. It is another game again that I tend to play year after year after Final Fantasy VI. Just an amazing game to play. 14. This is where you start talking about a little bit of contrasting with Aaron's. My 14 is Super Mario World, and again, we talked a little bit about it, so I won't go into great detail. But I like the fact that this was. Nintendo experimented with Super Mario 3 and giving you things like the Hammer Brothers suit and the Frog suit, which I think was really interesting. They're just new types of suits that let you play the game and interact with the game and interact with the environment in very different ways. And you play the game. I remember playing so hard, like my goal was to find a Hammer Brothers suit. And even though I might get it and I might lose it in like 5 seconds,
it always happens.
I'm so jazzed. I was just chucking these hammers everywhere. And the suit itself is pretty terrible as far as like mobility, as far as just being able to hit things. I would say the Fireball Mario is probably even better.
Yeah.
But it's just the feeling they gave you. And they took that feeling and they moved it. They spiced it up a little bit when they went to Super Mario World. They gave you Yoshi. They gave you the ability to interact with Yoshi in various ways, either like jumping off of him or eating things and spitting fireballs. The cape I thought was a really cool addition to it. I know a lot of people will probably look at it and say, "Oh, you're going after other caped superhero type things," but I didn't see it that way. I thought it was a really good way to interact with our Mario character that we really enjoyed, and I think that there was a very, very full package in there. You mentioned having the Star Road, having the special levels and the special levels, and the quick path to Bowser's Castle through as opposed to the long path.
So cool.
I mean, it's just such a great game. I think I would be remiss if I didn't put it in my list. I just felt like it's just such an amazing part of my gaming career.
Yeah, and it's one where I go back and forth on whether I would call this or Mario Galaxy my favorite Mario. Mario Galaxy, I think the modern graphics and the 3D, I really do. I think it's a standout game. But of the 2D Marios, I mean, this one is just so memorable. I spent so many hours trying to find everything. And I want to touch on something you said on the cape mechanics. I think that as much as people love the raccoon suit, and I will never forget being able to fly in Mario 3 the first time, the physics and the momentum that you build when you do the swoop down with the cape, that part was just, there was nothing like that out there. And I don't think I think now there have been so many subsequent platformers and other type of games that have kind of gone supposedly above and beyond that to where it seems commonplace. But at the time, go back to 1991, there was nothing even close to that out at the time. And the fact that you were able to play that, it really made an otherwise great game. It just gave it that extra something to make this one of the best of all time.
No, it really did. So moving on, so 15 here is an interesting one. We've talked a little bit about World of Warcraft and MMOs.
Yep.
I think I needed to add EverQuest to my list here at 15. And EverQuest is one of those games that I almost put Ultima Online here in this slot, because Ultima Online, I think, arguably really helped define a lot of the way MMOs play. But when EverQuest came out, they started with the class system predominantly, and that class system is what now defined World of Warcraft, what defines all MMOs from here on out. Everyone talks about classes, everyone talks about levels, and that was just such an important part that I just couldn't leave this one off the list.
And even though I haven't played, Chris obviously is more the MMO guy compared to me. I remember this when it was out at the time. This was just a game that took the world by storm, and I remember you talking about it at the time, so I'm not surprised to see this one on your list. Yeah,
it's absolutely great. All right, so 16. We already talked about its sequel here, but I had Diablo 2 at 16. Now, I could have very easily put 3 on here for the same reasons Aaron mentioned. I won't belabor the point too much more, but I'd say that Diablo 2 for me, I actually think Diablo 3 is a better game, but I took 2 largely because it is such it was a game. Diablo 1 was very revolutionary in how it kind of attacked that kind of defined that genre. But when they came back, Blizzard came back with that second iteration with the necromancer, like corpse explosions, all these things that just made the game just so cool. I spent countless hours playing this game with friends, just trying to go out in search of loot and trying to go kill monsters and all these things. It was such an amazingly put together game, and it was one of the ones where in Diablo 1, it was a little bit janky, I'd say, to do multiplayer. You can certainly do it, but Diablo 2 streamlined that interface, streamlined the way you played, and you can easily jump into a game, whether it's single player or with friends, hopefully, and just plow through the game as however you please. Yeah,
and I think that was a standout. Even though I did not come to the series until Diablo 3, the fact that it is still being played to this day, even though there's a sequel, I mean, that tells you it has that. Only Blizzard can do it, I feel like sometimes. Only it can have that kind of nostalgia where people are still trying to figure it out, keep it alive, make mods, all kinds of stuff. It's just an amazing story in gaming history.
Yeah, and the Heroic Cube stuff was really, really cool, I think. It's just new ways to take loot, to get loot, to have, to impact your ability to find loot and then transmute it and things like that, socketing items. And I mean, it's just such a fun thing to do. So I'll leave it there. So 17 for me, again, as an NES game. We're seeing a lot of NES in my list. But it's Mega Man 2.
Great game.
And it is my favorite Mega Man. Despite the fact that I don't speedrun Mega Man 2, I've speedrun the X and X2, I really still think Mega Man 2 is just such an amazing game for me. I mean, it has... We've talked many times about controls and precise mechanics, and if you ever want to find a game that is just obsessive in the jumping mechanics and the responsiveness to jumping, it is this game. Just an amazing, amazing game, and it's challenging as well. I mean, you can't just easily breeze through it.
Metal Blades, though. So much value out of those Metal Blades. I will say that you touched earlier in mentioning Castlevania 3 being your favorite NES soundtrack. Mm-hmm. This is actually my favorite NES soundtrack. Mm-hmm. I think Mega Man 2 completely stands the test of time and is still playable today.
Most definitely.
I would say that the Bubble Man stage is my favorite track, but people are still remixing that soundtrack today. It's insane.
Yep. So number 18 for me is a game that is a little bit more interesting to me. It's a relatively new game. We just talked about it last year. It's one that I'm sure everyone knows about, but I really wanted to add it because it really just has all the things that I would expect to have in a game, in a modern game, and that's Overwatch. I just think that, we've talked about it before. One of the things that has always bothered me with these kinds of games, quite frankly, online kind of, whether it's team-based or capture the flag or deathmatch, whatever it might be, is that if you're not one of the ones that are on day one and you're not fighting day one and you're not really putting everything together, and just leveling up and getting really good and, and playing, number one, you've lost out because the teenagers, the 10-year-olds who are playing 24/7 are going to beat you, and they're going to, it's just not going to make for a fun experience. Overwatch is one of those games that I would say, granted, it is very fun for you to actually win. It is not required for you to win to have fun, and it's one of those things that Blizzard has pieced it together so well that I could just be getting trounced and still have fun. I have every single character, whether you're a tank or you're a healer, you're support, you're DPS, whatever it is, every character feels very unique. And I could be a healer in one way. I could be Mercy, and do like a direct heal kind of thing. And then I can realize, you know what? I want to have a little bit more mobility. I'll go Lucio or whatever. And you're still doing the same kind of thing. You're still healing your teammates. You're doing it in very different ways. The gameplay style is just so different from character to character to character. And that, to me, is just something you can't get in many other games. And I want to be able to show Blizzard that I really appreciate the time and effort they put into the game. Now, of course, there are people that would probably say that the balance is somewhat off in some cases with respect to competitive play. I don't do competitive play, admittedly. But I think as a core product, Overwatch is just put together so well, and it represents itself so well that it deserved a spot in my list.
Yeah, and I agree. I think the art to this game, too, is something that I really want to commend Blizzard on, because it's a beautiful game. All the characters look, even if you don't know what they do, they all look unique, and it's very memorable.
Right. Okay, so my 19 on my list is I'll just say the original game, the original PC game. Although there was a remake that came out, or a reimagining in a sense, came out last year, and that's Doom. Doom is just one of those games that I don't really have to say too much about it. It defined first-person shooters. Everyone looks up to how it worked. You could say Wolfenstein a little bit as well, but Doom is really where just the id created such an amazing experience as far as speed. Momentum going into the game, and just complete craziness, over-the-top gore. It all just came together to be an excellent game. And the reason that Doom 2016 is such a great game is because the original was so amazing.
I will never forget the sound effect of the double-barrel shotgun, you breaking the barrel down. It's just stuff like that. There's so many little things. I played so much of that game growing up that it really does. The fact that it is still relevant all these years later, even the original is relevant all these years later, is a testament to just how well it did with that game.
Yeah, it's just really amazing. So Doom is an awesome game. I know I don't want to spend too much time on it because we're running a little bit long here, but Doom is amazing. Play it if you haven't already. Now, my 20, this is a really fun one for me. I spent a lot of time playing these games. It's probably no one in this world is probably going to pick this game gonna pick this game out of my list necessarily. Or expect me to say this, but my 20 is SimCity 2000. I've talked in the past about me playing a lot of SimCity games, and 2000 was the one I played so much. I reticulated so many splines, Aaron, you have no idea. It was such an amazing game for the time. SimCity 1 was great, but when 2000 came out, it had so much to do. It had, the acrologies. It had a lot of cool things that were just so fun to play. And I spent so much time building great cities in that game that, I just can't. I cannot. It got ported everywhere.
I played the Super Nintendo version more, but SimCity 2000, very, very landmark game.
I would say the PC version is the canonical, is like the right version to play. But, you think about some of the troubles that Maxis has had, and they'd had pushing out, later SimCity games, and how I actually think City Skylines has become a better game as a city simulation. But you have to hand it to SimCity. They were the only ones doing it back in the day. They were doing it right. It was such an amazing game. You really felt like you were under pressure to make the city work well as the mayor. And of course, when Godzilla attacks, there's always some fun to be had, I guess, as well, in the thing as well. So
I was frustrated, but
great game. So really, that is my list here. I just think that there are a lot of games that I went back and forth with that I probably could have easily added, but these are the ones that's kind of sit with me as the games that if you put them in front of me today, I would still just be just excited to play them as when I played them back in the 90s, maybe early 2000s, or even as early as or as late as last year. They're just exceptional games across the board, and I commend all the people that took the time to build such amazing games and release them to the public. So.
Excellent. Very fine list. So with that, we'd love to hear what you think. Obviously the very first episode, only 10 games, you can't include everything. But now that we've dialed it up to 20 games, we'd love to hear, what else do you think belongs on our list, knowing the type of gamers we are and some of the themes that you've seen emerge. So we'd love we'd love to hear more from you. Hit us up on Twitter, Biz Casual Gamers. I think that it will be a fun discussion that we can engage in online. So
what did we get wrong? That's what we see. What did we miss?
I Am Setsuna clearly should have been on the list.
Should have been number 1 post our list.
So with that, let's get into a game assignment. So Chris, I know that we had done, for anybody who listened to the last episode, we had done one assignment. I know you got tied up and you were actually playing a different game. So we're going to audible a little bit.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm going to have to call an audible this time.
That's fine.
I played a little bit of Nier, but I intended to play more of it. But a funny thing happened. The Steam sale started, and I picked up South Park: A Stick of Truth. And knowing that the new South Park is coming out in the next couple months or whenever it's going to come out, I figured, it's an RPG. I love RPGs. It has some interesting humor in it, and I think that while I never really watched South Park all that much, I wanted to try this game while I could, and I gave it an hour to see if I'd like it. Well, I played through the entire thing all the way.
So you liked it, is what you're saying.
I did really like it. So I'm going to go ahead and audible into that for this one. We'll save Nier for the next go-around if we can do that, because I definitely want to play this game. But Stick of Truth was one of the... I was in the mood for an RPG, and you can say that Nier is an RPG, but South Park is a traditional turn-based RPG, which I think was really, really just the right thing for me at the time. So let me say, this game is not for kids in any way. And not that you would expect it to be for kids with South Park, the name on there, but it is beyond the most explicit of explicit things in the world. But if you are crazy, like ex-Simpsons addict like me and Aaron, I think you might find a lot of humor in some of the things. If you're easily offended, do not play the game. Just don't.
Yeah.
Don't
play even look at the game on the show.
But if you want to see, don't even look at the game. If you want to take everything that's on Twitter today that will get you called all sorts of horrible names, if you want to engage, if you can find some humor in some really, really tasteless jokes, this game is exceptional. And I actually think even if you take the actual horribleness of some of those jokes out of the equation, the game is actually a pretty fun RPG. It's about the South Park kids, and I'm not going to get into spoilers or details, but the kids are kind of playing their own little imaginary elves versus humans kind of fantasy thing that's very Skyrim-esque, of course.
Right.
That spirals, and I guess in the background there's like this spiraling counter stories that are actually happening in the world, and it's funny how the South Park kids just don't seem to really understand what's happening. But it has so many hilarious tropes in it. It has so many references to just hilarious little counterculture things. I think probably every minute you're playing that game, it has a small little Easter egg or a small little thing you could look at once and you're like, oh my god, I see what they did. That is, or you're just rolling on the floor laughing. Keep in mind you're also still playing the game itself, and so. I'll give you one little example that I was talking to Aaron about it's really a funny thing where you go to you're walking through the town and you find the preacher sitting on a bench, and the preacher asks you, have you found Jesus? It was just kind of a funny kind of thing we're akin to hearing from those kinds of portrayals in comedies and such. And of course a quest pops up, find Jesus. And so this is a little bit of a spoiler, I get, but you go over to the church and you walk in the church. And you're sitting here thinking, well, how do I go pray? How do I find Jesus? And you hear this little, from the pews. And you walk over to the pews, and then Jesus pops up, and he's like, "You found me, kids! You found Jesus!" And you do this a little bit more, and eventually you get a summon for Jesus, where he can come down and help you
which is my favorite part. That part was epic.
It's just so just imagine you're in not in a boss fight. Jesus can't help you there because bosses are scary. But, you can, in the middle of a normal battle, you can call Jesus down with this assault rifle who will just assault rifle and shades on, who will just pepper spray the enemies and then fly back up to heaven. So, I don't know. It's just those kinds, that's just a taste of it's a very tame taste of some of the things you might find in the game. As far as, the overall RPG mechanics, so the story was crazy as you expect. The mechanics were actually really good. They have an interesting little mechanism where when you attack, whenever you select an attack or like a melee attack, you can choose one of two buttons to use: a button that hits with a hard attack, or a softer attack. And if you do the softer attack, you can hit multiple times depending on the weapon and the character. And when you actually go to swing, kind of like I Am Setsuna, there's this little star that kind of that pops up and it bings a little bit. And if you time your attack, your button press right at that point, you can hit harder. You can get special effects.
So it's like the
in some
momentum system.
Kind of like a momentum system.
Okay.
And so I think that it was really fun to me because it kind of, number one, it keeps you from kind of just smashing attack. You have to try and if you just pound the button as hard as you can, it will definitely hurt you. You won't deal nearly as much damage as you should. And so that was one of the things that really spoke out to me. The other thing is the game has, a seemingly infinite number of items that you can play, and they're all hilarious things. Like, I've had like elven uniforms, I've had doctor's uniforms, I've had all sorts of crazy things. And while you might use them to actually, change the color, change how your character looks and interacts in a hilarious way. They also have very hilarious effects that are very relevant. I won't spoil any of those at all, but you should look at those as well. As I've started watching people play this game now that I've beaten it, I can tell you I've never noticed the same person playing, even similar characters, never seen the same gear twice. And I don't know if that's like something random or if I just haven't played enough of the classes. There are 4 classes. But, it just seems like there's a lot of stuff to do in the game. The game is appropriately length. It has an appropriate length. I might play it. It might have been 20, 25 hours. Okay. I don't know. It's not super, super long, but it's also just right for a BCG kind of a mindset where you play the game every night for a couple nights, and maybe it's 10 to 15 hours. I don't know, but it's not super long.
Yeah, it was funny. So hearing you describe this, the game that first immediately came to mind was Charles Barkley's Shut Up and Jam Gaiden.
Oh, yeah.
So
yeah.
How would you say, if somebody like that where you said, I came here for the humor and to get a laugh, but I actually surprisingly discovered a pretty good game underneath. Yeah. Is that probably a fair point of comparison, would you say?
I think it is fair. I actually think that South Park is a better game. It's better all around. It's more polished as far as an RPG. It has, if you like the South Park style jokes, and you have to just know how South Park is and the offensiveness of those kinds of games. If you like that stuff and you get, you find it funny, you're going to find it much even funnier than Shut Up and Jam. I think Shut Up and Jam has a very interesting, it's admittedly I think made by one guy, right? So it's like it's not quite as polished, and you understand why. It's absolutely hilarious to play the game. But Stick of Truth is polished. It looks beautiful on the PS4 or I think I was playing on the PC. Looks beautiful, and it's just the animation. It's very South Parky in the animation. It's very it sticks to its source material very, very well. So you'll just feel like you're actually playing the TV series. Very cool. Well, that sounds like a fun one. So I'm glad to hear. I know the sequel's coming out. So if people checked out the first one, I have no doubt that they will be picking up the sequel. South
it sounds
Park
like you will
Fractured
be playing through.
Butthole.
Yeah.
That is Fractured BUT space HOLE.
Yes, exactly.
Of course, when you say it
no relation.
But anyway. But yeah, no, it's a fun game. I definitely think it would be fun to play. Now, next episode, hopefully, Aaron, you will not audible like I did and have to beg for forgiveness.
No worries.
We actually have an interesting one for you, and it's actually one that you can play on one of 2 systems. I've played this game before on the Vita. However, I think it is available on the PS4. But it's one that I think generally has a very interesting kind of an approach on things. The game is Gravity Rush.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to this.
Yeah, I'd like you to play this game, see what you think about it. It's got a very unique kind of an approach to the system, or to the mechanics of how you play. I told you I played it on Vita, and I actually had some issues with playing it, and we'll talk a little bit about that when we get to the next episode. But I want to see where you play it, number 1, 2, what you think about it, and 3, if it means that you're going to continue, because the sequel just came out in the last 6-8 months ago or so. I want to see if that drives you to play the sequel.
Okay, very cool. Well, I'm looking forward to it.
Well, very good, very good. Well, we apologize for a little bit of a longer episode this time, but I think it's really fun to continue to go through these things. Please make sure you let us know what you think about your top 10 or top 20 games. If you have the desire for us to go through those kinds of notable mentions, top 10, whatever it might be, we can certainly do those as well. I think that would be really fun to conversation down the line. I know people have certainly told us that they really enjoy us bringing up games they'd never heard of before. That really helps kind of expand their gaming mind, so to speak, and we are certainly happy to do that. But before we leave, I will remind you, please, to check us out at businesscasualgamers.com. Please take the time to rate us on iTunes. Remember, Aaron is bribing you to do so.
I'll give you games.
Subscribe on YouTube. Follow us on Twitter at BISCasualGamers. And with that, we will wrap up episode 40.
See you next time.